When Americans first imagine life in Canada, they often picture a softer, snow-covered echo of home, familiar enough to feel safe, different enough to feel intriguing. But when the plane lands and the boots hit the pavement, something far less visible begins to unfold. Not a grand cultural shock, but a quiet unraveling of habits, expectations, and assumptions. Canada doesn't confront Americans with chaos or intensity. It disorients with subtlety. Everything looks almost the same yet functions just a bit differently. The street signs are in both English and French. The colors of money are vibrant and plastic, and public spaces hum with an unexpected quiet. People thank the bus driver without hesitation. Strangers hold the door for longer than necessary, not for praise, but because that's simply how life works here. It's this almost imperceptible shift that Americans first notice. The volume of everyday life seems to lower the moment they cross the border. Conversations are calmer, movement slower, aggression rare, and it's in this lowered volume that the real differences begin to echo louder. For Americans raised in a culture of individuality and directness, Canada's collective restraint can feel foreign. The politeness here isn't a performative gesture, it's structural. Canadians apologize for brushing past someone or accidentally interrupting. Even when they're not at fault, sorry is not just a word, it's social courtesy, a preemptive bridge to harmony. And while it may sound superficial at first, the consistency of its use reveals something deeper: empathy woven into interaction, a shared commitment to social balance over personal assertion. That extends into everyday transactions. In Canada, tipping exists, but it lacks the emotional charge it holds in the US. There's no guilt, no tension in calculating the right amount. It's done out of appreciation, not obligation. Even financial behavior feels different. Canadians often speak of money with more humility and less spectacle. There's pride in being stable, not flashy. A modest car, a functional home, a comfortable life, these are seen as success. And in public, this humility is mirrored. Loud displays of wealth or status feel misplaced here. Instead, there's a quiet reverence for balance, for living well without needing to be seen doing it. Public life, too, moves differently. Sidewalks in cities like Vancouver or Montreal are not battlegrounds of urgency. People walk with a kind of measured calm. Subways are subdued. Even children seem to absorb the cultural rhythm, waiting in lines, staying composed. For Americans, especially those from bustling urban centers, this can be jarring. The energy feels muted, sometimes mistaken as coldness. But beneath that restraint is a deep respect for space, physical, emotional, and social. Canadians seem to live by an unspoken agreement. Peace is maintained through mutual consideration, not constant negotiation. One of the clearest reflections of this mindset emerges in how conflict is handled, or rather, how it is avoided. Road rage is rare. Arguments in public feel taboo. The emotional temperature of daily life remains strikingly low. For Americans, where expression and assertiveness are often encouraged, this can feel like repression. But over time, many come to see it differently. It's not avoidance, it's a choice to de-escalate, a cultural preference for calm over confrontation. The winter, too, plays a silent but powerful role achieving this national personality. For Americans unaccustomed to harsh seasons, Canada's relationship with cold can be astonishing. Sub-zero commutes, snowstorms handled with casual resolve, and children walking to school in layers that resemble survival gear. But the most surprising part isn't the entrance, it's the attitude. Canadians don't treat winter as a burden. They embrace it, prepare for it, joke about it. Snow isn't an emergency. It's a shared challenge that brings people together, a communal trial that breeds quiet resilience. Even the smallest gestures in winter reflect this unity. Neighbors shovel each other's driveways without being asked. Drivers stop to help push cars out of icy patches. It's not spectacle, it's instinct. And over time, Americans begin to feel the cultural architecture beneath it all, a sense of collective responsibility so embedded. It rarely needs to be spoken aloud. Asterisk as the months stretch on. What once felt foreign starts to feel natural. American newcomers slowly absorb the quiet rhythms around them. They begin to mirror Canadian restraint, not because they're forced to, but because the environment subtly encourages it. The volume of daily life is low, but its emotional impact is profound. You start to see how even small changes in behavior shift the tone of a whole day. Holding the door, saying thank you to a stranger, waiting in silence instead of fighting for space. These aren't just habits, they're signals, and they start to shape you. The contrast becomes especially clear in the realm of public trust. In many American cities, life is lived with a degree of guardedness, locking doors by reflex, avoiding eye contact at night, watching your belongings in public. But in Canada, the tension lifts. Parents allow their children more freedom. Teenagers ride public transit alone. People leave laptops unattended in coffee shops while ordering. These acts, seemingly trivial, reveal a society with different baseline assumptions. Here, the norm is that people won't take what isn't theirs, that systems will function fairly, that communities look out for one another. This faith in public infrastructure also defines the Canadian healthcare experience. Americans often arrive with apprehension, bracing for bureaucracy or long delays. But what they find instead is a system built not for profit, but for accessibility. The pace might be slower, but the fear of financial ruin from a simple medical visit evaporates. There's a quiet dignity in knowing your health is not a commodity, that alone reshapes how many Americans think about risk, family planning, and even work-life balance. And that balance is another point of divergence. In the US, productivity is often worn as a badge of honor. Hustle culture saturates everything from late-night emails to side hustles that define social worth. In Canada, the attitude shifts. Work matters, but it doesn't consume. Even in major cities, offices empty early on Fridays. Vacations are not only taken, they're respected. Many Americans feel disoriented at first, wondering if they're falling behind. But eventually, they come to see it not as laziness, but as prioritizing living. This shift becomes especially visible in rural communities and smaller cities. There, the cultural pace slows even further. Neighbors know each other by name. Local events draw real participation. Farmers markets, community centers, and ice rinks become spaces not of transaction, but connection. For Americans used to anonymity in suburbia or competitive urban life, this closeness can feel both intrusive and deeply comforting. There's a sense that people are not just coexisting, but genuinely caring for one another. Weather, again, becomes a binding force. A snowstorm doesn't isolate, it unites. Strangers share shovels, check on the elderly, and form spontaneous alliances to get through the cold. These are not emergency responses, they're cultural reflexes. In a country where nature routinely tests people's resilience, kindness becomes a survival tool. And it's this kindness, unassuming, constant, and uncelebrated, that leaves the deepest impression on Americans. Eventually, the transformation becomes internal. Americans living in Canada start to re-evaluate what they once thought of as normal. They stop equating loudness with confidence, urgency with importance, or wealth with value. Their gestures soften, their expectations shift, their instincts, once tuned for competition, recalibrate toward cooperation. And it's in the everyday crossing a street, ordering coffee, borrowing a neighbor's snowblower that the difference crystallizes. Canada does not force change, it models it through thousands of small, ordinary moments. It offers a mirror to those who arrive from faster, louder places. It shows what can happen when a society prioritizes balance over dominance, trust over suspicion, and quiet dignity over constant display. But even as Americans adjust to Canada's rhythm, the experience remains layered. Beneath the surface calm lies a culture that quietly challenges their deepest assumptions about success, safety, and self-worth. Over time, they realize that Canada doesn't just look different, it feels different in ways that are harder to define because they aren't built on visuals, but on atmosphere. The emotional climate here is softer, not weaker, but less volatile. It's a place where dignity is preserved not through confrontation, but through mutual restraint, and this emotional restraint, once mistaken for coldness, starts to reveal its true nature. It's a social contract, a shared understanding that connection doesn't have to be loud to be real. And then comes the shift in identity. Americans, often raised on a narrative of rugged individualism, slowly begin to shed the belief that independence means isolation. In Canada, interdependence is not seen as weakness, it's seen as maturity, the belief that everyone plays a role in maintaining the public good, from holding doors and clearing snow, to paying taxes with a sense of civic purpose. The fabric of society here is sewn together with unspoken acts of cooperation. That's perhaps the most surprising realization for many Americans, that in a country so similar on the surface, the true difference lies in emotional infrastructure. Where the US teaches self-reliance, Canada teaches shared responsibility. Where one values success that can be seen, the other values peace that can be felt. And it is that peace, that gentleness of daily life, that changes people the most. It's visible in how people speak to one another. Tone matters here. Direct confrontation, while not impossible, is softened by language. Criticism is framed constructively. Disagreement is tempered by politeness. And the absence of verbal aggression creates space for something rare, the ability to listen without needing to win. For Americans raised in a culture of debate and performance, this conversational humility feels almost revolutionary. Even the landscape reflects this ethos. Nature is not just scenery, it's embedded in the national identity. Canadians don't just admire it, they plan their lives around it. Lakes, forests, trails, and seasonal changes become part of the cultural rhythm. Long weekends aren't spent at malls, but at cottages, not to show off, but to reset. There's a reverence for stillness here that challenges the idea that progress must always be noisy. And that stillness leaves a mark. For many Americans, the most enduring effect of life in Canada is not what they gain, but what they let go of. The constant pressure, the background fear, the instinct to rush, to prove, to defend. Slowly, they release those habits, not because someone tells them to, but because they're no longer necessary. In this environment, people start to value new things. A slower meal with friends, a walk in light snow, the quiet knowledge that someone will help if your car is stuck. These moments don't go viral. They don't need to. They build a different kind of life, one not measured by acceleration, but by presence. And when Americans eventually return home, the contrast is almost painful. The noise, the urgency, the edge, it all rushes back in. But now, it feels unfamiliar. They begin to notice how rare calm has become, how expensive peace can feel, and how easily kindness gets drowned out by speed. So what does Canada give them? In the end, not perfection, but perspective. A living example of what happens when a society chooses patience over power, and empathy over ego. For many, it's a quiet awakening, a sense that another way of living is not only possible but already real.